Ladies and gentlemen, fellow real estate professionals and tech nerds alike, welcome back to another episode of the Tech 4 podcast with myself, Jake Youngs, and Mr. Tech himself as well. Today we are talking through this wonderful thing that the NAR brought upon us over the course of the last couple of years that have just recently modified, this thing known as the CCP. No, I'm not talking about the Chinese Communist Party. I'm talking about the Clear Cooperation Policy.
Actually, I thought it was about the Chinese today.
I mean, we can make it about the CCP if we need.
Let's not make it about the CCP.
Yeah, not this kind of CCP. So here's what we're kind of diving into today, guys. Number one, there's actually shockingly a very large number of realtors and MLS members that don't understand that Rule 8.0 even exists. Rule 8.0 is the rule that comes down from the NAR and gives us the clear cooperation policy, by the way. And by the same token, there's an equal number of agents, if not even more, who are extremely confused about what the brand new changes are to the clear cooperation policy. So what we're aiming to do today is to hopefully clarify some of the things that are going on with this, especially
100%.
with a lot of the new changes, because believe me guys, this stuff is confusing unless you really sit here and study it. So Jeff, would you give us a little bit of a history of Rule 8.0 and tell us about, like where this thing came from, what in the world does this thing do, and what does it mean?
Back in 2019.
Oh Lord, here we go.
I know. Don't worry, I'm not going back to the 17 and the 1800s like we have to do in the fair housing classes. But back in 2019, so I am going to go back 6 years ago, and I was at the NAR convention. It's the annual convention. It always goes East Coast, West Coast, East Coast, West Coast, and in this case, it was in the West Coast. It happened to be in San Francisco, which I don't think they've brought back since then, but we were in San Francisco. We were at their meeting there. There was about 15,000 realtors across the country, and there was a super, super controversial vote. Now, the 1,000, I don't know how many NAR voting directors there were at that time. Let's call it 900 at that time. I think we're over 1,000 now. But at that time, the NAR voting directors got into the room and they had to vote. It was so big, they had to have an overflow room so people like me who are not NAR voting directors could go ahead and see what is going on. I'll never forget that in San Francisco. And what they did is they were voting on something called the Clear Cooperation Policy, also known as the CCP.
Or Rule 8.0.
Rule is 8.0. Although some MLSs, they do want to call it a little bit different, which they shouldn't. But yes, I'm going to call it the CCP. But yes, here, and most MLSs, they do call it Rule 8.0.
And by the way, just to give you guys a reminder as well, most of the rules that your local MLS follows are brought down from the National Association of Realtors. Correct. There are a handful of MLSs that have their one-off rules that are either more restrictive than the rules from the NAR or something totally different that the NAR hasn't addressed, but most of these policies and rules come directly from the NAR.
And the other thing that I want to do to piggyback off of that, which I mentioned earlier on, is these rules all have different fine structures based on the MLSs. So what happens is that the board of directors of each of the 520 plus MLSs, they say, okay, we have these rules from NAR, we're going to make our own fine structure. And there's some that are super expensive and some that are not as expensive. Some of them enforce it more than other MLSs. So it's really up to the hyper-local board of the MLS of what they want to do and how much they want to charge.
Okay, that makes sense.
So let's fly you back over to San Francisco again. And this super, super crazy vote came about of the CCP, MLS 8.0. And they go, here's what we're going to do. We are going to basically take away pocket listings so that when you have or when you get a listing, you can't just say, hey, by the way, I'm going to go ahead and, hey, do you want to buy this listing? Do you want to buy this listing before you put it on MLS, the multiple listing services? That's basically the gist of what it is. There's some caveats in there, which we're going to discuss in a second, but that's what it is. So I'll be super quick about this. I want to give you the official definition of clear cooperation. It says, Within 1 business day of marketing a property to the public, the listing broker must submit the listing to the MLS for cooperation with other MLS participants. Public marketing includes, but is not limited to, flyers displayed in windows, yard signs, digital marketing on public-facing websites, brokerage websites, displays, digital communications, marketing, e-blasts, and other things available to the general public. So this is what it means, Jake. It means that if I come over to your house, you're my seller, I'm the listing agent, and I say, Jake, here is my 52-point plan to go ahead and market and sell your property. You're like, wonderful.
And by the way, none of this involves the MLS.
Yeah, right. And so because it doesn't involve the MLS, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a sign in your front yard. I'm going to put it on Facebook and Snapchat and TikTok and IG, Instagram, and things like that. And you're like, that sounds great. By the way, I'm also going to put it in the local newspaper and the local magazines. You're like, even better, go ahead and do it now. And I go, oh, and on top of that, I'm also going to market it to the public, to millions of people out there through our MLSs and the syndicators out there. So in other words, the big Z's of the world, the Zillow and the Redfins and the Homes.com and Realtor.com. And you're like, that all sounds good except for one thing, Jeff.
Can't help but notice real quick, you mentioned the big Z's. Only one of those was a Z. Every one of them was an R.
The Z's and the offset. Thank you for clarifying.
Sorry, I had to be that guy.
That is okay, because I had to clarify you on the Chinese Communist Party, whatever that is, but fair. So I'm going to call it once again the Zillows and the off Zillows. How about that?
All right.
By the way, quick side note. Did you know that Redfin got bought up just a couple of weeks ago?
I heard about that.
I know,
yeah.
by Rocket. Anyway, I'm digressing. So here's what's going on, is that basically you go, Jeff, I like everything you said you're going to do to market my property, except right now I have a leaky roof and I need to replace the roof. It's going to cost a lot of money. I need to find the labor. And I want you to do everything you can to market the property, except for put it on your MLS thingamajigger, because I don't want other agents coming to your property. I go, Jake, I would love to do that, but I can't. And you say to me, Jeff, my property, my rules, get a sign in the front yard. And I'm like, you know what? I cannot do that unless I put it on the multiple listing services. And he goes, well, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hire another agent. I'm like, well, you can do that, but guess what? Every realtor has to abide by this rule. And you say to me, why would that be? And we have something called the Clear Cooperation Policy, MLS 8.0, that prevents us from marketing to the public unless we also put it on the multiple listing services, not within 24 hours, but 1 business day. So what this means is that if you take a listing on a Friday, that means you would have to market it, or you'd have to put it on MLS by Monday. If Monday was a national holiday, it would be a
Wednesday. No, Tuesday.
We're getting tired over here and it's hot in the room. Bottom line is that, yes. So in other words, you could technically take that pocket listing for 2 or possibly 3 days, and that's what it is. So what is the problem with doing that, right?
Right. I was about to ask, why in the world is this necessary? Doesn't this block my ability to try and procure my own buyer to my own listing?
That is a great question.
Why in the world is it even a necessity for this to exist to begin with?
There's a couple of different reasons for that. And the first reason is, let's talk briefly about fair housing. Okay. So what happens if you go, you know what, Jeff, I just want you to market it to the world. And I'm like, yeah, but first let me go ahead and talk to my crew over here, a bunch of investors, right, that all happen to be the same as me, because I'm a green guy or silver guy or gold guy or whatever color you want to call it. And basically, I'm going to go ahead over to them. So there could be some fair housing violations potentially involved in it. That's one of the reasons.
Okay? Understood.
But I think the bigger reason here is, if you keep your listing to yourself, and I only ask my peeps over here to go ahead and put in their best offer, are you really getting the highest and best for your client with 10 people in my investment group rather than marketing it to the world?
Well, weren't there a number of sellers who were complaining back in 21 and 22 about them selling for $50,000 over the asking price and still not getting as much as they thought they could be getting for the house? It blows my mind, the mindset that sellers had in those days.
Correct.
Sellers and the real estate industry as a whole were, I'll say they were built different for those days.
Very, very, very different. And that's what it comes down to. But on the other hand, once again, now that's in a great market, right? Could I have got more? And, but once again, how do you know, regardless of the market, whether it be high or low, are you getting the highest and best by sending it out to a couple of your friends or investors?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a great question to ask. And ultimately, who knows? Only the free and open market knows.
And only the free and open market knows. And by the way, hence the reason eBay exists out there, right? No, but if you think about it, right? eBay, if I'm trying to buy this camera, I want to sell it to the highest and best. I don't want to just market it to my local crew here and be like, hey, how much will you pay for this? Well, if I market it to the world, I might get a lot higher price.
It's like somebody in Taiwan might show up and say, I'll give you $500 for this $300 camera.
Exactly, and like, here you go. And that's what it comes out. So that's the reason behind it.
It just shows up and says, I want this very sun-kissed Ricoh Theta, and I'm going to spend the extra amount of money to get this thing.
And it is very sun-kissed. You're absolutely right. So
yes.
Now, I do want to remind you there are some caveats on there, okay? And the caveats are going to be things like you can, C-A-N, market it to your actual brokerage before it goes out there. That's one of the things. Rentals are excluded. Some other things.
The only things that, by my understanding, the only things that fit within the requirements of Rule 8.0 are residential properties between 1 to 4 units. Anything outside of that, commercial, residential 5 units or more, parcels of land, rentals in this case, none of those fit within the requirements for Rule 8.0. And by the way, not to steal your high chair here or anything, but when it comes to advertising this thing, say you're advertising it to your brokerage, one of the things I always mention in classes is a lot of brokerages have Facebook groups or some other social networking group that all the agents are in. Here's the problem. A lot of the, well, not a problem for the brokerage, a problem for you and your position with 8.0 is that most brokerages have these things called affiliate partners that are spending money to be a part of your brokerage, and as such, they're also in those Facebook groups. And because of the fact that they're in your Facebook groups, they're most likely not licensees inside of your brokerage, which means at that point, that constitutes as advertising to the public. So if you share it in that Facebook group, though it's a brokerage Facebook group, that does trigger Rule 8.0, at least by my understanding. You may have a different one, but that's what I know about this.
No, it's a great way to explain it, and that is absolutely correct. And that's why I said make sure you know the exact rules, and if you want to, and the intricates of the rules. I want to remind you that they have a little quiz on the ARMLS website, and regardless of where you are in the United States, take a look at it. It's some pretty fun questions that apply to everybody. The other thing that I want to mention before we get into a deeper dive of the new thing that just changed with the CCP just literally a couple of weeks ago in the time that we're filming this, I just want to remind you of the quick fine structure, everybody. Remember,
they're not very fine.
Well,
No.
yeah, and they aren't fine. They're unfine. But I do want to remind you, as I mentioned in previous podcasts, that every MLS across the United States, all 520 plus of us, I want to remind you that every single MLS has a different fine structure. Here at Arizona Regional Multiple Listing Services, as of, and it kind of got brought up, just to give you the history, March 10th to April 5th was $0 because we're just rolling it out. And then
2020.
Oh yeah, did I? Yeah, this is five years ago, everybody. And then also from July 6th, it went up to $250, which is half price. I want to let you know that as of October 6th of 2020, it is a whopping $500 a day. And did I mention? It's $500 a day, not a year, or not per. It's per day. So in other words, per property on top of
Yes.
that. So in other words, if I stick a sign in the front yard when I list this property and I do not put it in MLS, I do want to remind you that, remember, it's one business day. So after that business day, if you do not market it in or put it into the multiple listing services, it's $500 a day. So that means a week would be about $3,500. A month would be approximately $15,000 fine that you will get.
Which, I mean, to be fair, if you're selling a $10 million house and if you can get a buyer on that property in 1 week, that $3,500 is basically going to be a couple of pennies out of your compensation off that property.
And by the way, there are people who have done that before. There's agents who said, I don't care, fine me. I'm selling a $20, $30, $40 million property. $5,000 is not going to hurt me much. I'm more than happy to pay it. So I do want to remind you there are people like
I am
that.
more than happy to pay it as long as I get both sides.
As long as you get both sides on top of that.
Yes.
So I want to remind you, everybody, as of October 6th of 2020, here at ARMLS, check your own local MLS to get the actual fine structure, but it is $500 a day.
So here's one really tricky question that I want to ask you, and then I'll dive into the latest changes. So let's say I've got this property that I'm getting ready to list on the market, but as it's Friday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm sticking the signpost up in the yard, and somebody just happens to be driving through the neighborhood and sees me putting the signpost out and says, hey, I want to see your house. So they come in, take a look at it, and they decide they want to submit an offer on it. We go under contract within the weekend. By the time Monday morning rolls around, we're already opening escrow, submitting the earnest deposit and all that stuff. Does the listing still have to go in the MLS if that happens? Because we haven't gone that full business day of public advertising. Gosh, I might not even have my sign on the post in the yard just yet. So if all I'm doing essentially is helping out with the contract at that point, does it still have to go in the MLS?
So if you market it to the public, so you said you were about to put the sign in the front yard. Now, did you actually put it up?
I've got the signpost, but I have not put the actual sign up.
Got it.
However, the guy that came in is a member of the general public, though.
Interesting. So I'm going to give you my personal opinion.
Okay.
Okay. My personal opinion would be no. You wouldn't have to do it because you are not officially marketing to the public out there. Happen to see it, totally get it, but you didn't put your sign up. So I'm going to say no. I'm not your broker. I'm not my own broker.
Consult your broker on this one.
Yeah, consult your broker on this one. My answer would be no.
Okay.
But it's a great question.
So great answer to that one. So we've had, like we said, a bunch of changes to the clear cooperation policy here in 2025. Basically, what's kind of gone on, I do think a lot of this is the result of a lot of these lawsuits which have happened over the course of the last couple of years.
Most of them are.
We've had a lot of situations with sellers and agents who don't really want to put their listings in the MLS at this point. And for that matter, it doesn't really even matter if they go in the MLS at this point, because the big thing with clear cooperation was, of course, the fair housing like we talked about. But that's when sellers were offering compensation to buyer's agents, usually by default. These days, we don't even know if a seller is willing to offer compensation until we've got a contract with a seller compensation addendum sitting on our desk. So we've made some modifications to, well, we haven't made it, like Jeff and I haven't done it, but the NAR has made some changes to Rule 8.0 in this particular case. Right. And for the sake of time, we'll work our way through this quickly here. So they've broken this down into 3 brand new things that you guys are capable of doing. Office exclusives, delayed marketing, and the other one is an exempt listing disclosure. So the summaries that I've got on these guys are directly from the NAR. The office exclusive. This right here would be an exempt listing where the seller has directed their property not to be spread out or disseminated, however you pronounce that. Disseminated.
Disseminated.
Yes, thank you. Through the MLS and not to be publicly marketed. There are rare situations where the seller does not want their listing to have public exposure. Been given a lot of great examples of that in the past. The office exclusive listing shall be filed with the MLS but not given out to other MLS participants or subscribers. So the short and sweet thing I want to let you guys know about all these changes is no matter what the case may be, you still have to at least let the MLS know that you have this listing. You have to file the paperwork with them, whatever the case may be. But now, I'm not sure how exactly it works within ARMLS or if they've even made the changes for Rule 8.0 just yet.
You haven't yet.
Okay, yeah, they haven't gotten to it just yet. But basically, the way that this is going to work is you can put this thing into the MLS and they're just not going to blast it out to other people. That's the office exclusives. It just stays within your office and that's about it. Delayed marketing. This is kind of another variant of a coming soon-ish. It's somewhere between coming soon and active. It's that gray area in there. So by definition from the NAR, a delayed marketing listing is an exempt listing where the seller has directed the listing broker to delay the public marketing of that listing through IDX and syndication for any period as allowed by the local MLS in its unfettered discretion, which, by the way, each MLS, from the sounds of it, is going to decide what the maximum period of time is going to be for this delayed marketing period. So this could be anywhere from a day to a month, even up to a year, depending on what the local MLSs decide.
And I'm going to just chime in just for 1 second, Jake.
Yeah.
I want to remind you of two things. So you bring up a really good point. The number one, it is up to the local MLS. Our MLS, actually, when I was a board member, we voted 30 days. Every MLS is a little bit different. But the bigger thing is, and I can't believe I did not say this, and you bring up a really, really good point, coming soon status qualifies for the CCP. So I want to remind you that if you put it in the coming soon mode, once again, that would satisfy the requirement of the CCP. So that is also good, which is the biggest one. I can't believe I didn't mention that out there. And then one very last thing, I promise you this one. This is actually really interesting. Did you know, well, I think you know, did you know out there that actually coming soon does not get syndicated to those syndicating models, the public-facing models, such as, and I've mentioned it way too many times, such as the Zillows and the Redfins and things like that. So in other words, we really have 30 days, everybody, to go ahead and kind of have a pocket listing, except for the other subscribers of MLS that are out there that wouldn't go out to the public. So just mention that to them when you are marketing their property.
Of course. And guys, I did say there were 3 different things that you could do. I meant to say there's 2 things. But basically, from the sounds of it, there's going to be a new, probably disclosure form or something coming out, probably going to be coming from your state association or whoever does your contracts, something known as the exempt listing disclosure for your MLS. So whenever you're going with one of these listing exemptions, whether it be office exclusive or delayed marketing, whatever the case may be, you do have to file this thing with the local MLS. And according to the rule, you have to get a certification obtained by the listing broker and the seller, which is going to be this disclosure form, which includes 3 separate things. Disclosure about the professional relationship between the participant and the seller, acknowledgement that the seller understands the MLS benefits they are waiving or delaying with the exempt listing, and confirmation of the seller's decision that their listing not being publicly marketed and disseminated, struggle with that word today, by the MLS as an office exclusive listing, or that their listing will not have immediate public marketing through an IDX or syndication as a delayed marketing listing. By the way, I do want to let you guys know most MLSs, especially ARMLS, already had an option for sellers to select for their listing not to go out to Zillow, Redfin, and all these other
and we still have that. We still have that in there. And also, I want to mention another thing just really quick. And by the way, that was a mouthful, I have to tell you.
It was.
You know, a lot of people go, why wouldn't somebody want to be on those syndicated public-facing websites? And I have to tell you, you need to think about this, right? What happens if you are a movie star and you don't want to be out there on a Zillow, especially with what is happening with the football players or other, sports figures where they're showing their old, look at my crib. And people are literally just breaking in, and they know exactly where their $1 million, NFL ring is, and that's why they don't want it on the Zillows anymore. So.
Right. Or the scenario I have for you guys is, imagine there's somebody who's moving to another state for a job, but their boss doesn't know that they're getting ready to move to another state for a new job. If their boss finds out, their boss is going to lay them off the second they figure it out. That's another reason, for example. So with Rule 8.0, they did give us a new, actual, I think it's section 1.03 directly from the NAR, which is the rule about the exempt listings, which says if the seller refuses to permit the listing to be disseminated by the service, got that right the first time, the participant may then take the listing office exclusive, and such listing shall be filed with the service but not disseminated to the participants. Filing of the listing should be accompanied by certification signed by the seller that he or she does not desire the listing to be disseminated by the service. Essentially, I think what this is going to boil down to...
I was going to say, you need to put that in layman's terms.
Yes.
That to me was a sleeper, yes.
Well, what I was going to say is I think essentially what we'll see as far as forms in the future is probably a modified listing contract agreement, a modified ER, or even a modified EA. One of those two basically where the seller is just going to select when and how soon they want their listings to go in the MLS, if they want them in the MLS at all. So we'll see how this winds up changing over the years. I mean, I think, in my opinion, Rule 8.0 for its first couple of years is pretty restrictive. I think there's a lot of an outcry from the public and from realtors as a whole saying, hey, we like this, but we need a little bit more breathing room and stuff that we can work with to be more creative. So we'll see, especially as these lawsuits continue to happen over the course of the next couple of years, we'll see how things continue to change. But in closing, do you have anything else that you want to add to Rule 8.0 real quick?
No, I thought that was a really good overview. It was a mouthful.
Yes.
I think you kind of need to maybe dig into this a little bit more than just the podcast, but at least we gave you the general information. I'm a big believer of you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
And I think at least that we threw it out there to all of you. Go check into it. Go Google it if you need to. Dr. Google is always wonderful. Not always correct, but go check it out.
No, definitely. All right, guys, with that being said, we'll go on ahead and leave you hanging tight until the next episode. And we look forward to seeing you actually in the next episode of the Tech 4 podcast or in class with us very soon. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.